Sup y'all, it's me, it's your boy Asmongold, and today I figured I'd give my feedback on Fury Warriors in Legion. The alpha's been out for kind of a while now, and I think it's already gone through 2 iterations of changes, which is why I think it's a good time to talk about what I like and what I don't like about those changes. One thing I do want to say before I get into it too much though, is whenever I make a video being critical about anything that's in an alpha or a beta stage, people always comment below and they say, wait for the game to come out to talk about, to be critical of it, you're complaining about an unfinished product. And guys, that's exactly why I'm complaining about it. While Blizzard might not always agree with what I'm saying, I think that they're always listening, and so I'm going to put my feedback out there and talk about what I like and what I don't like about how, my favorite class really is shaping up to be in the new expansion. Now, I've kind of got this bracketed out in a couple of different sections, and so the first thing I really want to talk to you guys is just a basic gameplay of the class. Now, I think that one of the most important questions, and probably not one of the most, it's the most important question, is a Fury Warrior fun to play in Legion? Fuck yes it is. It's awesome to play. It feels really, really cool to use all of the abilities. The new animations I think really, really fit the style of Fury very, very well. As a new player coming into the game, I think that they would really, really enjoy playing a Warrior, and I think that's a really, really great thing. I have absolutely no real criticism of the way, especially like the way everything is telegraphed on the screen. It looks really, really great. And so let's go ahead. I've got a screenshot here. Now let's look at the new abilities that I have, just so you guys can see what I'm talking about. Like on my basic action bar, 1 is Charge, 2 is Bloodthirst, 3 is Raging Blow, 4 is Furious Strike. Furious Strike, the only thing that's furious about that ability is me when I have to use it because I didn't have Bloodthirst crit. But besides that, Furious Strike is what you have to use. It's basically a filler ability that you use whenever you don't get a Bloodthirst crit, and it has 2 charges, and charges recharge very quickly. And it's basically a filler ability, so you don't just stand there doing nothing whenever you don't get a Bloodthirst crit. It sucks. Okay. 5 is why Execute. It's Execute. I can't believe it. Of all the ones I missed, it's Execute. 6 or E is Pummel. G or 7 is Whirlwind, and the Shift R down there all the way at the end is basically the new version of Recklessness, which is called Battle Shout Recklessness. I don't even know. Battle Cry. I honestly don't remember how many times they've renamed it. Basically, the way it functions is for 5 seconds after you use it, and it has a 1-minute cooldown, and it can be reduced to a 30-second cooldown. 5 seconds after you use it, all of your abilities have a plus 100% chance to, all of your special abilities have a plus 100% chance to crit. Now, right above that, the bar above it, the F key right there is bound to Rampage. Rampage costs 90 Rage baseline, then it can be talented down to 50 Rage, and it's basically a Rage dump, and it's a very high damage ability that you were kind of channeling. I guess it's kind of like Fists of Fury, because it seems like you can't really do anything else while you're doing Rampage. It's a very, very fun ability to use, but I find that it's clunky in terms of actually using it in a very optimized manner. R is obviously Bladestorm. Shift F is Odin's Fury. This is like this new ability. It's an ability with your artifact weapon. It's very, very fun to use. You guys will see it on the screen right now, and it's fucking awesome, right? And it's this huge, you're just spinning around like a wild fucking beast, and it's got like a 40-yard range, right? So like whenever you're swinging around and use that ability, you're probably going to pull extra packs, but fuck it, you're going to kill them anyway because you're a warrior. Okay, that's how good that ability is, and you got Bladestorm, and so it's going to be no big deal. Either way, ability is very, very fun to use. It's probably one of my favorite things that they've added into the Legion Alpha, or Legion, hopefully it makes I would be amazed if that didn't make it into live. Anyway, next ability is what's called Heroic Leap, and that functions basically the same way. Next one is Shockwave. Functions the same way. It's a talent now. Berserker Rage is now on a 1-minute cooldown, and you can talent it down to a 30-second cooldown, and it doesn't automatically activate in Rage. And whenever you use the talent, I think it's called Outburst, the talent makes it to where it does activate in Rage. Because of how important in Rage is, the talent basically becomes mandatory, though. We'll talk about that later. Shift 4 is, if you thought it was Commanding Shout, well, that's what it's called, but it's actually basically Rallying Cry. They just renamed it, really. Next one is Enrage Regeneration. Enrage Regeneration, I know that some people might not like this, but I actually really like the way it works now. So whenever you use Enrage Regeneration, Bloodthirst self-healing is much stronger now than it is on live. And so whenever you use Enrage Regeneration for the next 5 or 8 seconds or something like that, every single time you use a Bloodthirst, it will heal you for 20% more, 20% of your health. And so if you use it twice, obviously that's going to be 40% of your health. And I think it's a pretty cool way for you to kind of like, I don't really like warriors like standing back and like not doing anything and healing up. I think that warriors should, I really like the way Second Wind works now, where you kind of, the more damage you do, the more you heal, like you never stop going big dick. And so I really like the whole idea of, if you want to heal up, you do more damage, you keep fighting. And so I think that's really cool. Next one is Avatar. Avatar is basically useless. Well, it's not useless, I just don't really find it lines up well with any of the other abilities. Next one is Piercing Howl. Functions basically the same way as basically it does now in live. V is the my racial, and then I've got Heroic Throw on shift 3 there. And so those are the abilities. Obviously, a lot of abilities are gone. Wild Strike is gone, but it's been replaced with, you thought that it couldn't get worse? Furious Strike. It has. So anyway, again, like the abilities are pretty fun to use. I think that the pruning has been more or less successful. There are things that I don't like about it, but I think that talents do kind of make up for it, because a lot of the talents you can talent into are new abilities, which is I do like it. I do also want to say that this iteration of Fury is probably the most fun to play outside of a raid environment. I don't necessarily like playing this on like a sustained fight. And the reason for that is just the RNG that's involved with the spec. Well, with Bloodthirst, I don't find that fun. And we'll talk about that later on. But outside of that, I really, really enjoy playing this spec. And I think that's one of the most important things. And something Blizzard obviously is, that should be like one of their main goals, is to make it fun to play. And I definitely think that Fury Warriors are fun to play. Now, after this, let's go ahead and look at the talents. Okay, let me pull them up for you. Okay, so we're looking at the first tier of talents, and just a second here. So we got Shockwave. Shockwave is basically, it works the same way as it does right now on live. You're going to pretty much use Shockwave for maybe larger PvP scenarios, and maybe a couple of other things as well. Or like maybe challenge modes for CC, but it's basically the same as it is now. Stormbolt, again, the same as it is now. Use that for maybe higher rated arena, depending on the comp that you're playing, and also maybe for single target DPS on a boss fight. Meat Grinder, basically the way that this works is whenever you use Whirlwind, usually it makes it to where you only, your Raging Blows hit other targets as well, but this Meat Grinder makes it to where Rampage hits other targets as well for 50% of the damage, and Rampage is a very, very high damage ability, and since you don't really have any other rage dumps whenever you are doing in an AoE situation besides Whirlwind, Meat Grinder is the obvious choice for any sort of an AoE situation. Your 30 talents here, Warpaint, whenever you're enraged, you take 30% more damage. Warpaint reduces that damage increase down to 20%, so it's 10% less damage that you're not taking. I would say that this is going to be the baseline talent that you want to use for for most probably most like raiding situations that you don't really need a lot of utility for. Bounding Stride is basically the two heroic leap glyphs put together. It has a shorter cooldown, and it also gives you a run speed increase after you use it for 3 seconds, 70% I believe. Furious Charge makes it to where 5 seconds after you charge in, you take 20% less damage. That could be useful, especially for like doing something in like a raid or something like that. I don't really find it's very fun to move out and then charge back in, no. So I would prefer for them to change Furious Charge into something else. I just don't really think that it's very usable. Endless Rage basically makes your auto attacks do more, give you more rage. Overpower, see, a lot of people might misunderstand Overpower, and let me explain it to you. Imagine that they rename Sudden Death into Overpower. That's Overpower, okay? It's not the Overpower that we used to know. It's basically it can proc on your auto attacks or really any attack, and it's just, sometimes it procs, sometimes it doesn't. It's basically the exact same as Sudden Death. It does have the increase in critical strike chance, just like the old Overpower did, but it does not have a chance to activate that I read on a tooltip from dodges. So I don't really like the way that they just like basically rename Sudden Death. I think that if they're going to bring Overpower back into the game, they should do it and not just rename a new ability and say, hey, we gave you back Overpower, right? Avatar is basically the same way as it is on live. The way its cooldown, it just doesn't really line up with other things. Second Wind, after you don't take damage for 5 seconds, I believe, you gain 6% of your health every second. It's extremely, extremely powerful for anything that you can kite and then come back and fight again. It's going to be really good for maybe making warriors a little bit more viable in 2 DPS and other types of PvP situations, although I do prefer the Second Wind iteration that we have right now, to where whenever you're under 35% health, you gain 20% leech. I find that to be more fitting in the warrior fantasy. This Second Wind doesn't really fit honestly. Double time just gives you another charge of charge. Very simple. Imposing Roar is basically the Rallying Cry glyph, where whenever you cast Rallying Cry, or as now it is Commanding Shout will give you 20% leech. Okay, I mean, I think it's fine. Unquenchable Thirst is going to be probably the most useless talent out of the 75 abilities, and I would say maybe you could use it if you're fighting maybe a single target that you're not able to have a lot of uptime on, so maybe like a PvP situation. It basically makes it to where your Bloodthirst gives you 10 more rage every single time you use it. With how much rage you're getting as Fury, I just don't really find it's very worth it. Frenzy functions very similar to the way that Frenzy did in Diablo 3 for Barbarians. It's an ability that you use. It can stack up to 5. Each stack that you use it deals damage, and it also gives you a stack, and it gives you 4% haste, stacks up to 5, and it can be refreshed. So this is going to be kind of a skill cap thing where you want to keep up your Frenzy stacks whenever you're fighting a single target boss. I like the ability, but I also don't like having to manage something like that. I don't really find it very fun, personally, but I can see why they're adding it into the game. Bladestorm functions the same way as it does now. Your 90 talents, so Heroic Strike is another one of the abilities that they basically changed its functionality and they kept its name. Heroic Strike is not what we know it as, or what we used to know it as. Heroic Strike, basically every single time you use it, it makes it to where your Rampage will do more damage, and you can use it up to 3 times to empower your Rampage to do I think it's 45,000 extra damage. I can see it being useful in very, very big, burst phases for certain arenas and stuff like that. But outside of that, I don't really find it, very useful at all. And honestly, I'm really disappointed that they changed Heroic Strike from the way it was in the first alpha iteration, and it was a lot more fun then. I'm very disappointed to see the way that they've changed Heroic Strike, and I really hope they change it back to something. People that want Heroic Strike wanted it as a ability that you can press whenever you have all your cooldowns up to make you do more damage. It looks cool on the screen. You got extra numbers coming up on the screen. It's off the GCD. It's very fun to play with, okay? And again, I think that the focus should be making the game fun, and so I would really want to have it changed back to the way it was. Outburst, as I said before, Berserker Rage had a 1-minute cooldown. Outburst reduces that cooldown to a 30-second cooldown, and then on top of that, it makes it to where the Berserker Rage, because it baseline does not give you an enrage buff, but if you have Outburst, it does. So, in my opinion, I think that Outburst is so powerful, and enrage is such an important buff to have, that you really want to make sure that you have Outburst for pretty much any situation. Massacre makes it to where whenever you get an execute crit, your next Rampage costs no rage and deals 100% extra damage. That is extremely powerful, but I just don't really know how you can really fit that into the rotation, and is that really going to be more useful because it's only a 20% thing, more useful than Outburst because if Outburst gives you the enrage buff. It's kind of a toss-up. If there's a boss fight that you have to fight on 50% down, not 100% down, I would say Massacre could maybe be worth it. Your 100 talents here, Carnage basically reduces the cost of Rampage down to 50 rage. It reduces it by 40. Reckless Abandon is what I prefer to use just because it makes your Battle Cry, which is the new version of Recklessness, a 30-second cooldown, which is down from a 1-minute cooldown, and it also, whenever you use it, gives you 100 rage. So you can use that and basically get 2 Rampages right off each other, and then also keep your enrage buff up longer. I think that Carnage does do more damage though, but whenever I'm doing questing, Reckless Abandon is up pretty much every single time I have to kill something something it isn't going to die in just a couple of hits. So I think it's very useful in that situation, and I would use it for pretty much all other situations outside of maybe a more single target situation. So Dragon's Roar functions a little bit differently than it does now. I kind of like the way that it functions, but at the same time, we'll see. So Dragon's Roar, you use it, and for I think it's 6 seconds or for a period of time afterwards, it makes you do 20% more damage. So if you look here, you can combine Avatar, Bladestorm, and Dragon Roar all at the same time. That was going to make for extremely powerful AoE situations, even with Meat Grinder as well. Wow. So I haven't tried that yet. I haven't really had a chance to, but my expectation is that that's going to be probably one of the strongest AoE bursts in the entire game. So these are the talents that we have right now for Fury. In general, I like some of them. Tier 1 choices I really like. Tier 2 choices I really like. I don't like Furious Charge though. Tier 3 choices, I think it's okay, but I wish they would just rename Overpower to Sudden Death. It would make more sense, and it would also make Massacre more viable, but it would also probably make it too strong, honestly. Second Wind does 60 talents. Basically is a kind of more of a healing. Like, I don't really know what we're really trying to get at with the 60 talents. Is this more utility or healing? I'm not really entirely sure. 75 talents, I do like those outside of Unquenchable Thirst. I think that should be some sort of like singular burst ability, like maybe if they put Siege Breaker there, that would be perfect in my opinion. The 90 talents, as I said, I just don't really like Heroic Strike, the iteration that it has now. If they made Heroic Strike the previous iteration, that would make it much more competitive and a much a harder choice, and it would allow people to kind of have, there wouldn't really be that big of a difference between the three abilities, so it would allow people to kind of play their playstyle rather than play what's going to do the most damage. But as we all know, there is always going to be one thing that is always the best. That's just the way math works, right? 100 talents, I do also really like the 100 talents. And I'm not really talking about liking them in the situation that I like all of the abilities necessarily. I like the juxtaposition of choices, okay, if that makes sense, and how each of these choices changes your gameplay. Carnage, I'm not really a big fan, as I said, of Rampage, honestly, and I'll talk to you guys about that in a second. The rest of these, I think, work pretty well together. If they made Carnage do something else, the first iteration of Carnage was probably very powerful. It made it to where basically Rampage functioned the same way that Arms Execute did, where whenever you cast Rampage, whenever you had more than 50 rage, because it used to be 50 rage baseline, it would do more damage based on how much rage you used to cast it. I think that could be probably too powerful, but maybe if they nerfed Rampage's base damage down, Carnage could be more viable and probably the better PvP. The better PvP talent, I'm not really sure. Either way, so that's kind of the way that I feel about the talents. Now, the synergy of the spec, I think this is also very important, because this is one of my biggest criticisms of the spec right now, is that I don't really feel that the abilities fit very well together. Enrage is a very short duration. It's not 8 seconds like it used to be. I think it's like 4 or 6 seconds or 5 seconds. It's very, very short. So having to, because if you cast Enrage or you cast Bloodthirst and you get an Enrage proc, then if you cast Bladestorm right after that, you're not even going to be able to finish the Bladestorm in the time that you're going to have Enrage up. And it's just like, again, I think that Fury should either be balanced around Enrage or not, and having this gray area where you're supposed to have Enrage up as much as you can, but they're not going to necessarily balance around it, is just going to kind of piss everybody off at some point. You're going to have people that get 1-shot or 2-shot, and there's a Fury Warrior that does ridiculous damage, and then other times where they don't do any damage. And guys, I want to just say something that I've said a million times before, but I'll say it again, is that not critting an ability is not fun and engaging gameplay. I really don't like the way that Blizzard has like this fixation, it seems right now, with giving each spec some sort of RNG element. And I'm okay with some RNG, and I'll give you an example of RNG that I think is good, is that Wild Strike procs right now, Blood Surge procs on WoD Live right now, 6.2. work very well. They're not necessarily game breaking, and I don't like that now it reduces the recklessness cooldown, but outside of that, I think just procs like that are very fun. But because Bloodthirst not creating is something you really have no control over, and on top of that, you get more rage whenever you get a Bloodthirst crit. I don't know if that still happens in Legion Alpha right now, but on top of that, you don't get enrage, which doesn't activate Raging Blow, and on top of that, now in Legion, you don't get the attack speed boost, which if you go with Endless Rage, it kind of exacerbates the difference and the damage loss that you have by not creating a Bloodthirst. And again, it's just something you have no control over, and I think that, honestly, what I would really love to see more than anything is for Bloodthirst to just be a baseline ability, maybe even make it like a secondary ability that you have, similar to like Colossus Smash used to work, and you couldn't use it all the time, but whenever you could use it, it was like a burst phase with all your damage up. I think that would make more sense, and I just don't really like having my entire spec be built around RNG, and I don't think that the emergent gameplay that comes out of that is very fun as well, especially for somebody who gets into, like, let's say, like a pug group, and then they get a bad RNG pull, and then they get kicked out because they do shitty damage. That's a completely realistic situation that could happen, and the more RNG that's built into a spec, the more likely it is to happen. I really don't like it, and I really hope that they at least give players some sort of agency and control over their own damage. Now, also, as I said before, I think Rampage, because rage capping a warrior is not a good thing, and because Rampage costs 90 rage baseline, unless you get the talent for it, you're probably going to rage cap in order to use it, and it's kind of counterintuitive because you're not supposed to rage cap, but at the same time you kind of have to use this ability. Also, another thing is that the AoE abilities that we have, so like whenever you cast Whirlwind, and Whirlwind, by the way, I want to say one more time, Whirlwind looks awesome to use. But whenever you cast Whirlwind, after that, you basically have Meat Cleaver, and it doesn't have stacks or anything like that. You can just cast Raging Blow, and it's just a buff, and as long as you have the buff up, Raging Blow hits extra targets. It's a really, really good change. But anyway, what I would really like to see is for those abilities to be more obvious to where you're in range or not in range to hit other targets with those abilities. It seems like they're very, very close together. Like they have very minimal range. So whenever you use one of these abilities and you don't hit other targets and you have no real way to tell how close you need to be or how far away you need to be, that kind of is not really, I don't think it's a very good idea. They've used a lot more telegraphing abilities to show players in real time what the range of their abilities are, like a little circle around an ability whenever they cast it. If they could do something like that with Whirlwind in a way, or at least with, do it with Whirlwind and then make sure that Meat Cleaver basically has the exact same range, or, Meat Cleaver and, that stuff has the exact same range, that would kind of make more sense, I think, for players. Last thing is the Heroic Strike. I really, again, wish that they would go back to using the original iteration of Heroic Strike, where, you use it and it does damage, okay? Very, very simple. You don't have to empower a new ability or something like that. I don't really think anybody enjoys that. Personally, I think it really sucks. So anyway, that's kind of the way that I feel about Warriors and Legion right now. I think that the first alpha iteration that they had was the absolute best. Warriors were in a very, very good spot. Outside of the, as I said, like basic core problem of just an RNG spec, I don't really find that fun. I don't really know anybody that does. But anyway, besides that, I thought Warriors were in a very, very good spot and were even more fun to play than they are now on Alpha. So hopefully Blizzard can kind of, really what I really want to see is for the spec to be really, really fun to play. And so we're already there. And also for players to have at least some sort of agency and control over how much damage they're able to do, and not be based around just an arbitrary, like basically random roll of critting or not critting. Don't really find that fun, and I don't really think a lot of people do either. So anyway, a lot of really good changes. I really like the idea behind Fury. I really do enjoy the idea, and I think it's very, very fun to play. And I just really hope that they can take these ideas forward and maybe improve on them and make it even more fun by the time that we get it out to live or beta or whatever. So anyway, guys, that's pretty much all I got. If you played on the alpha before, go ahead and let me know how you feel and what you've kind of experienced, what you like, what you don't like, whatever. And as I said before, will this stuff change? I don't know, but I figure I'll give my feedback, and maybe it will, maybe it won't. Either way, so thanks for watching, and like, comment, subscribe.